Hello and welcome to this episode of Pause with Nandini on NRI Affairs. Today we have our first politician on the show. A very warm welcome to Sapna Samant, who is a candidate for the Greens Party in New Zealand. The Green Party is a left-wing party and their stated policy is to protect the climate, restore nature, and build a country that works for everyone. I state this as shorthand for the principles Sapna stands for, but there is so much more to her, and we'll hear from her just in a minute. She's a practicing GP who arrived in New Zealand in 2001 from Mumbai. She also took time out to pursue her other passion, which is film and writing, and she obtained a master's degree in film, television, and media studies from the University of Auckland in 2004 and has worked in that space ever since. I find this part very interesting, and we'll pick her brains a little bit on this, where she says her interest in storytelling has enriched her experience as a doctor, which in turn has influenced how she sees disease and wellness. And let's expand disease and wellness to include society in the context of richness and the wholeness of people's lives and communities. A very, very warm welcome to you.
Kia ora, namaste. Ko Dr. Sapna Samant Hokoingwa. I am speaking from Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, Aotearoa, New Zealand. And so before I start, I just want to acknowledge the people of this land on which I stand, Ngāti Whātua, the local Maori iwi. As you know, we are all here, migrants on stolen land. So I think that needs to be acknowledged first. So thank you for having me on the show. I'm looking forward to all the korero, the conversation that we'll have.
Absolutely. Why don't we begin with talking about what is most top of mind at the moment, that you're a candidate for the Greens Party. How did that come about? Why did you think about getting involved in active politics?
I've always been, I like politics. I'm a political person. I like listening to stuff on the radio, and I like to understand what all of this means to everyday people. And for me, everything is political, from the quality of the air we breathe to the water we drink to the clothes we wear. So I have, and when I lived in India, I voted in every single election that I was eligible to vote in. When I moved to New Zealand, I voted in every single election up till today. Local election and the national election. So yeah, I've always been engaged with politics. And because of my activism, which we'll talk about a little bit later, I was encouraged by my colleagues, my activist colleagues, to put my hat in the ring for the Green Party. I've always voted for the Green Party because their kaupapa, as we call it, their concept of putting people and planet before profits is very much appealing to me. So I've always voted Green. I'm a Green Party member. And so I put my hat in the ring to see what happens. And the process is really interesting with the Greens, is that you're not selected as a candidate by a random committee. You are actually selected by the members of the party across the country. And so I was selected. So here I am, standing for elections.
Absolutely brilliant. We talk so much about participating and getting involved in dialogue and discourse, and also being able to actually take our politics into mainstream in a way. And I suppose, this is a way that you're actually literally and figuratively throwing your hat in the ring and saying, I care. Basically, what you're saying is, I care. And one of the other things, of course, that we've spoken about a little bit is the fact that there is a rise in extremism, in polarization in our country, in India, and we in the diaspora see effects of that and consequences leading from that in various ways. Of course, I'm in Australia, you're in New Zealand, and your experience could substantially be a little bit different. I would love to know from you, what you see has changed from the time that you moved there. And of course, you've seen the change in government, you've seen perhaps new thinking in the immigrants that you're interacting with. What's the mood? What do you see? And how has that, what's happening in India, how has that spilled over in any way where you are?
Yeah, sure. So I moved to New Zealand in December 2001, and as does every migrant, I have to find their way around and settle in and all of these things, which is what I did. That was sort of the standard journey that a lot of us have, not everybody. And it was through my interaction with people was that there is, and this is, mind you, it's a very, my experience at that time was limited to a certain class of Indians, educated, mobile, middle class migrants who had moved to New Zealand, also wanting to settle in, and replicating certain aspects of culture and their lives and networks, as is common across the world in our diaspora. I never actually came across working class Indians, so people who, laborers, people who are not doing the same jobs as many upper middle class or middle class migrants come and do. And so for me, it was, it was the same old, your politics is developing, you don't really know new things. But as I settled into New Zealand and I began to understand the colonization and the struggles of Maori over here and how that affects the way there's inequality in this country, and what the government is doing or not doing for the people of this country. All of these things made me think about what exactly are my own politics. So you could think of yourself as a left-leaning progressive liberal because you have the privilege to think like that, right? You have all the securities you have, and then you think that, of course, I don't believe in this, that, or the other, and why are we discriminating and all. But when you move somewhere else, I had to dismantle a lot of those ideas, and along with that, my perception of many things within my own community changed, because when I started looking at people, and mind you, this is just me and I can be quite harsh, I hardly give a rope to people to hang themselves with, which is not a good thing. But I can get pretty impatient with these things when I look at ourselves as Indians, as what we call tau iwi. So we are guests in this country, pretty much. And what we come here and what we think and how we, what our interactions with other people. And I have found, by and large, our Indian diaspora is quite conservative. So even when we call ourselves progressive liberals, these are just words. To me, they're just words. So I would see that, and it was very disappointing for me, because we're just not moving in how we want to change this world or what we want to do. And then through that, my experience of Hindu extremism over here was first in 2007. Oh yeah, 2007, I think, when they had the first Hindu Council conference over here. And I looked at the brochure that was publicized, and I looked at all the material and all the words, and it made me very angry, because these were the things that I had seen in India. And you don't expect that to happen in the Western diaspora, where everybody's calling themselves, liberal, progressive, inclusive, anti-racist, all of these things. Yeah, so I went for that, and this was 2007. I made a little bit of noise, as I do. I stepped out of that. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
May I ask what was in that brochure that rankled?
Okay, so the saffron flag, which is the flag that we see now being bandied everywhere. So that, excuse me, so that was instantly recognizable for me. The Om on it, and then words like Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, and the world is a family, but of course we're not going to talk about the minorities from India. And so all of these things and the way it was framed as a multicultural concept that fits the
Right.
Western framework of what multiculturalism is, but kept out all the complexity. So we're not, when we move as people from non-Western cultures, we know our cultures are very complex and multi-layered, and we try, and a lot of people in the Western world do not get that. So I feel that I'm tired of educating people a bit, but we still need to stand up for that complexity, and we need to still stand up for all those layers and whatever that makes us who we are. And these people had removed all of that, as Hindutva does. So it was instantly, the bells were like, going in my head.
That single narrative, that single
Yes.
perspective, that
Yeah.
this Hindutva is equated with India,
Yeah.
where India is so much more than one
That's
religion,
correct.
any religion or any caste or any sect.
Yeah.
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 The other thing leading from that is what we kind of spoke about a little bit before, is that these attitudes of casteism, of having distinctions between human beings based on birth. And you also saw some of that percolate down into how people treat other indigenous communities,
Yeah.
or what they think of people who are not of their heritage. And I suppose that is where you can identify very clearly what the risks are then for larger community. I mean, some people might argue that, okay, well, this is an Indian problem, or this is, this is just for
Yeah.
the diaspora and they can sort it out. But actually, there are insidious ways in which this plays out across community.
Yeah, this is absolutely. So again, like I said before, that the Maori word for us is tau iwi. So iwi is sort of like a crude translation would be tribe, right? And so tau is other, but it's not the otherizing. It's just that we are not people of this land. So although we have generations of Indians who've lived here, who've tilled the land, we are still, we are not off this land in that sense. It's not in a derogatory manner that this word is used. It is used in a way where, and this is true of any country. If you go to France, you better know how to speak French, or Germany for that matter, right? So that is the same way, is that when we come here, we need to be knowing, or we need to try and understand Tangata Whenua, which is Maori. But we look at that through the lens of the Pākehā being the word for white people who colonized this land. And because we look at them, Tangata Whenua, through that lens, which is deeply problematic. We need to remove that lens, and we need to find the commonalities and understand the struggles of the people of this land, of Tangata Whenua, of Maori, and to see how then we can remove our own prejudices, and try to work and collaborate together, which is how I feel is how the world will progress, because it's the indigenous people who teach us a lot of things.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
you see some of the echoes of that in how the Adivasis and the indigenous people of our own country are having to fight for their land, for their way of life. One of the things that we hear about, and there's a lot of dialogue around that, is this model minority sort of. What is that? Is it an idea? Is it an expectation? And do we sort of do we play into that stereotype in some ways? And in what ways does that affect the diaspora experience?
Okay, so we could go on and on, right? just talking about the modern minority. So we know that the term originated, I think, in New York Times, I think, a really old article that talked about a section of Japanese migrants to America as a modern minority. You know, it's a big thing, and then that is applied to pretty much Asian migrants. But you know, talking about that over here, and again, I said before, where you know, I've come to New Zealand and I'm interacting with a certain class of Indian migrants who label themselves progressive, liberal, intersectional. That's the new fashionable word.
But I have to say, you went, then you promptly did your master's. So
I think there was, yes. I went to university because I didn't want to practice I didn't want to requalify as a doctor over here again. And I mean, honestly, after working in Mumbai for many years, I was quite disillusioned with practicing medicine because of the way it's, you know, it's very profit oriented. And so I did not really want to do that. So when I came here, I pursued my other passion, which was filmmaking, and I did a master's at the University of Auckland. My first master's, by the way. I've just finished another last year, but
what did you do again?
that was in directing drama. So still filmmaking, but directing drama. And yes, I think going to university and immersing myself in student life gave me a different perspective, because I had to do all those little jobs that all the other students did. I had to, you know, look up student job search. I had to go to the work and income office for them to make sure, which is, you know, like the Australian, what is it, the Centrelink, I think, for them to support me. I had to do all of these things, you know, interacting with student unions, interacting with all of that helped me.
Deeply embedded experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So do you feel then, now that you know you are a practicing GP, correct?
Yes, that's right.
And you do interact perhaps with I'm digressing a little bit, but still within that framework of the diaspora experience, where you are obviously interacting perhaps with young families or families where women are coming to you, and you might be exposed also to some aspects of, say, domestic violence or situations where someone who's come in needs support. And do you find that there is institutional support for the Indian diaspora that they can tap into? Do you see that as an opportunity area? And also, we've spoken a little bit about this, but I really loved what you said about the fact that because it's so underfunded, all of this, we have to tap into the network. What is that network? What is that indigenous community? Let's just talk a little bit about that.
Okay, yeah. So through all this experience as a student, you know, and then doing all these odd jobs and now practicing medicine, different insight into migrant life. And, you know, of course, then you come across working class migrants as well, Indian migrants, you know, who are quite invisible. Newer migrants coming in. I mean, as we know, domestic violence is not limited to a class. It is not. It is across every socioeconomic strata, every religion, every region. It's just the patriarchy, right? That pervades everything. So when I see, you know, people, domestic violence, it's a screening question in practice. So any woman who comes to us, if she's a pregnant woman or she's come with any other issues, we will ask them about intimate violence or sexual violence or domestic violence. A lot of them come with their husbands. And that's one thing which I love, is the husband starts talking, particularly Indian families, right? And I tell them to keep quiet. And I'd say, let her talk. Or I send them out of the room. Not everybody's forthcoming, but because we have to, of course, build a relationship as well. And a lot of them are scared because of their visa situation. what we have, what we don't have, apart from the underfunding, what we don't have is a genuine desire to dismantle that patriarchy, and show possibilities to these migrant women who have come and who are so tied to the visa, to the husband, to the in-laws, or they're pregnant and they don't know the rules of this country, they don't know anything. And we have to show them the possibilities, and that is really missing. So even if we are underfunded, that attitude, that idea of alternative, an alternative life is missing. Yeah, and it's also, in my experience, it's been it's pervaded by Hindutva people. So you have Hindutva people who have organizations that, work towards domestic, preventing domestic violence, but it's essentially that they are the ones who get the funding then, and the work is incomplete.
It's interesting how
Yeah,
all of these systems intersect, right?
that's
And
correct. Yeah,
and the dependencies then on that system grow further for the diaspora.
that's right.
If
Yeah,
that is the safety net that you have, then you might sort of turn a blind eye to some of the things that perhaps it's not palatable to you. But it is true that the right wing is extremely well organized, isn't it?
that's
And
correct. Yeah,
their
yeah,
networks are deep. Their learnings are old, and they know how to organize
yeah.
themselves.
It's a 75-year-old project, so
There is,
um
yes,
yeah. But coming back to working with indigenous communities, is particularly in this space, is Somali women have, they have done this work of resistance. I would say working against domestic violence and sexual violence is a form of resistance. And it's not always worked, because you have to still dismantle the colonization and all of that. But for Indian women, I think if we collaborate with Maori women who have built a body of work and a body of ways to tackle with domestic violence, is how we are going to be able to tackle this, because they understand it at multiple levels, from colonization to patriarchy, to being, to the racism, to everything. And that is what we need to tap in. It's still culturally safe, because Maori they understand what it means to be culturally safe, because they wanted themselves from everything. So they know they want you to be culturally safe with them. So these are the things that we can learn, particularly in
that's
that space that you talked about, domestic and sexual violence.
May I
Yeah.
ask if this is something that you might find scope to build on as work in your role as a politician with the Greens Party?
So our party, Marama Davidson, who is the Green Party co-leader. So if you know the constitution of party, we have two leaders. So Marama Davidson, she's Wahine Maori, a Maori woman, and in her role as a minister, outside of cabinet in the previous government, she led changes in sexual violence and domestic violence space, creating of this amazing legislation and its ongoing work, and so of course, I mean, she's very, very good at this. And we've had other Green Party MPs who've also worked in this space. Jan Logie in particular, who's retired now, and who's moved on. These are the people from whom, who will continue to do this work and help our communities.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this was really sort of an important topic that I did want to bring up with you. But now I want to also talk about the arts.
Oh,
And
yes.
that is something that I think you're quite passionate about, the
Yeah,
role of the arts and the media. And I know you have your own company, which is Holy Cow Media.
correct.
And
Yeah.
one of the things you had said was that the intention was telling stories that get lost in the colonial hierarchical setup of the media, stories of migrants that don't have space in the world of absolute commercialism or even politically correct multiculturalism, which tends to homogenize or work with the elite
Yeah.
within the communities. So there's a lot in there to unpack, but I do want.
Big words, right?
They're big words, but they are big words, but at the same time, it's quite simple as lived experience as
Yeah.
well. There are people who have been deliberately othered,
Yeah.
deliberately put on the sidelines. So, who are the people who have access to a platform? You and I have
Yeah.
access to a platform. But what are the ways in which more people can actually build platforms and sustain those platforms and create more diversity in voice, in opinion,
Yeah.
without having to sort of be mainstream in any way?
Yeah. So I think the internet has democratized, filmmaking. Let's just talk about that, right? Right. Filmmaking, storytelling, visual, audiovisual storytelling, even podcasts. Because I worked in radio as well. I worked as a freelance producer for Radio New Zealand for a very long time. It was completely different working for a government, a state broadcaster. And then, you can now, I mean, I don't do that anymore because, I've moved on in life doing other things. I think internet has just allowed people, and the phone is a really mighty tool. So anybody can tell stories. And I often see stuff on TikTok or on Instagram for that matter, even YouTube, where people they're just telling stories, and I think with those platforms and those mediums, you can you don't need the finesse of watching it, of the kind of stuff that you watched in a theater, I don't know, 35 mm, the old cinema, or even digital cinema as you see it today, because people don't have the tools or the money. But there are people who are telling their stories, and I think that's incredible. What we need is to be able to cut through that noise and see the worthy stories. And by worthy, I don't mean, the serious stuff, because anything that is like, oh, this is meaningful, I think everything is meaningful if you know how to tell a story. So yeah, people are telling that. It's for us to be I think for us to pick that up as say, seniors, big word again, to pick that up and encourage these people to tell their stories, because again, if it's their lived experience, we have to go with that, and we should not be imposing our ideas onto them. So I think the internet has changed a lot, and it'll keep changing, even from 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Yeah.
So yes, there are more people telling stories. And yes, I agree completely with you that the internet, the phone, all of that. However, as we see in India, when the media is sort of under one instruction booklet,
Yeah.
and that's the majority voice that most people are listening to, right? And that's where truth for them is
Yeah.
coming from.
Yeah.
So in that space, how does one then create spaces or fight against that and create these because end of the day, it's also money, isn't it?
Yeah.
Money and finance, and the whole commercials of being able to produce news or produce, not just produce, but even be able to have reach.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
where, so we've spoken about extremism and we've spoken about media. How does one sort of enable the fight against the other?
Oh, that's a thesis. That's a master's
That's the
thesis.
next master. I shouldn't bring anything to you. You'll run off and do another master.
Oh my, I was hoping that my exegesis that I wrote for my master's last year was the last one. No more academic stuff. But times in India, isn't it? It's very sad, and a lot of right-wing Hindu youngsters have taken up that space to spread even more hatred. It's just really sad because there is so much potential for young Indians in India. Because anybody in a rural setup can also, not rural, I mean, I'm stereotyping here, but anybody anywhere across, again, class, region, religion, everything can tell stories. But unfortunately, anything they put up is picked up, and then they have to face the police, and they have to face, I don't know, riots.
No, yes, yes,
It's
yes.
just really sad and unfortunate. So it's a tough question. I think unless and until the atmosphere in India actually changes, where we value our youngsters, not as unemployed mobs, but as those people who will literally make India into a superpower, like in a real sense, make India into superpower, and where we tap into what our ancestral knowledge is. Of course, there's so much cultural knowledge there it's amazing stuff, but we have to be able to tap into that. And that can only happen when the atmosphere in India changes, and the adults realize that we are actually the guardians of our young people and of that piece of land, and therefore we need to be protective, not destructive. There is I don't know the Reo, that is, I don't know how to say it in that language, but there is a fakatauki, or a proverb in Ma, where all of us are called or kaitiaki. So kaitiaki are the treasurers, the guardians of this planet for the next generation. And I really love that concept, because it's not short-term thinking. It's not about, what am I, just my son just needs to go to a private school, therefore I will do whatever. But it's about, what about the future generations, where everybody needs to coexist and keep on working together, because that is the only way the planet will survive. That's unfortunately not happening in India. It's sad.
It's a very poetic thought, but it's also very eternal thought. It's for all
Yeah.
time, right?
Yeah.
Just the way you said that, and I could see like the beauty and the sort of love in that thought.
Yeah.
But the thing is that also, like, someone like you will be seen as a troublemaker, isn't it?
Oh yeah, all the time, all the time.
You're the stirrer of the pot, and you're a troublemaker, and you're speaking truth to authority, and you're a thorn in their side, and all of these things. But essentially, people like you, to me, are dreamers, are people
Yes.
who are hopeful. Because if you didn't care, you wouldn't get so charged up. If you weren't a dreamer, if you didn't think that change was possible, why bother, right?
Yes, I
It
absolutely thank you for that. I mean, that I'll take that as a compliment.
is. It is
And
absolutely.
it's true. I mean, we can't be all doom and gloom, right? And I am that kind of person. I am eternally optimistic, practically optimistic, though.
Yes.
Call myself.
Yes, yes, of course, because I mean, you are getting involved and you are trying to sort of actually make a difference in from a position of power, but also a position of empathy and understanding and learning. We'll wrap it up a little bit now because there's so much to talk about,
Yes.
but couple of maybe lighter questions. Yeah.
Okay.
Since we are talking about the diaspora and you've lived in India for so long
Yeah.
before you moved, what is it that you miss about India?
Oh gosh, it's just that I think just being there, the energy, the just being in India, the smells and the air, and
I just took a deep breath.
yeah, all of
Remember.
that stuff is just you belong over there, that one part. And of course now I belong here too, and I have traveled across the world in different places, so I could potentially put my roots down anywhere. But that DNA, you are one with the DNA of that land. So when I land in Mumbai, I know I'm home.
Your home. Tell me, I wasn't going to ask you this, but I will. Would you ever go back? The work that you're doing here, there
Yeah.
is so much work to do in India. There's so much urgency. There's so much need for good people, hopeful, idealistic, wise people. Would you consider it?
I not yet, because I have lots of things to do. I always think that I will one day, either I will live in the Himalayas in Sikkim, because I really love that, or I will go to my ancestral place in the Konkan, which is Western Maharashtra,
Where is it?
along the coast. Hey, sorry.
What's it called? Where is your
Oh, so my ancestral village is Tendoli. We don't have any land over there, or a home there, because my great grandfather, moved away from there and moved to Mumbai. But yeah, I would love to. I mean, we've gone there multiple times to visit our ancestral temples. So yes, but it's a dream. I'll park it for the moment, but yes, I would. I would. Why not?
And now that you're in New Zealand, I want to, a lot of people, of course, from India, think about migrating, think about opportunities outside. What are the opportunities do you think for Indians in New Zealand? What are you seeing now?
Mm. See, the migration requirements keep changing, right? I think they would want doctors over here, nurses definitely. Um, there's lots of other jobs in the trades, like
Mm-hmm.
plumbing, in construction, and as you know, in New Zealand, all these things are, it's a fairly equitable
Yes,
society,
it's
and
well
so it's
paying.
that's correct. Yeah, so it's not that we look down. Nobody looks down upon these jobs. These are really crucial jobs. Yes, so there's jobs in hospitality. Yes, I think lots of Indian women can come here and start their own chapati businesses, and again, not looking down upon it at all. This is feeding people. It's a
Yeah.
crucial thing.
Yes. How lovely. I think, and in some ways, of course, and we may talk about borders and countries and all of that, but essentially, at least from my idealistic eyes, it's all man-made, right? These
Yeah,
borders, the
that's right.
flow of people across and the intermingling of cultures can only be of benefit to
Absolutely,
them.
absolutely. I mean,
Don't you
that's
think
what
so?
Indian culture is, right? It's from multiple sources and over millennia.
Absolutely. And let that be the hope uh,
Yes.
in the face of a lot of difficult situations. Let that be the hope. And I hope there are more dreamers like you who are also doers.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us.